And
I'd venture to say that Redwine's going to do most of the talking.
I doubt it.
He usually does.
But
that could be. I may later on decide to clip this microphone, but for now I'm going to start off just using this little microphone on the machine. And I'd also like to just say today's date and make sure I pronounce your names correctly. And then my first question is simply going to be a very general one. And I'll listen for a while, and then I may throw out a question or two, and I encourage you guys to mix it up a little bit. But as I say, this is the World War II Oral History Project, which I've been working on for 4 weeks and have about 3 or so weeks more to work on. And today is Wednesday, the 24th of August, 1994. We're in the boardroom of the Athens Regional Library, and I'm speaking with Mr. Morgan or Bucky Redwine. Is that correct?
that's right.
And would you pronounce your name for me, sir?
I'm Robert M. Thornton, Thurnton. I'm better known as Jack, perhaps, which is a nickname.
Mr. Thornton. Well, let me address you first. Either of you, but why don't I ask for Mr. Thornton's voice first? Would you tell me a little something of your experiences during the World War II era?
Well, where should I start?
Anywhere you like.
I enlisted in the Air Force, which was then the Army Air Force, sometime in early or middle part of 1942 as an aviation cadet. But I really wasn't called in to go to service until December of 1942. And the usual procedure then was to go to a boot camp or basic training, which was at Miami Beach, and then to various schools of sorts, and then to pre-flight training, which was at Maxwell Field, Alabama, and then to primary flying training, which I went to Avon Park, Florida, and that's to basic flying training, which was at Cochran Field, Georgia, which is now Herbert Smart Airport in Macon, and thence to advanced single engine training, which was at Jackson, Mississippi. It might be interesting to note that we were the first class at Jackson, Mississippi. Prior to that, the American Air Force had been training Dutch pilots.
Dutch pilots?
Dutch pilots, P-40s. We were the first American class there. And
In AT-6s?
AT-6s. This was in early part of 1944 by that time. And this is an aside, but we were young and single, most of us, all of us. And the Dutch pilots' pay scale was something like 3 or 4 times ours. So we had a hard time competing with the young ladies of Jackson, Mississippi, after the Dutch folks had been entertaining them royally.
How long were you stationed there?
Each segment of flying school was something like 3 months.
90 days.
90 days.
Yeah.
So you had to learn all you wanted to do in 90 days, or else they wash your butt out. So this was advanced flying school at Jackson, Mississippi, which was the AT-6s, which was then the advanced flying plane. And we got our wings and commissioned as second lieutenants in March of 1944, which means we were the class of 44C. And after that, we went to various transition schools to fly. We were to be trained as fighter pilots. A great many washed out along the way, because by that time in the war, there was perhaps an overabundance of young men wanting to fly in the Air Corps. But fortunately, I didn't wash out along the way, and we went from basic advanced flying to various transition schools, P-40s in Napier Field, Alabama, I think. And then to P-47, which was called the Thunderbolt, or the Jug, which was an outstanding fighter plane in World War II. And I forget whether this was somewhere training in Massachusetts and Providence, Rhode Island, as I remember. And thence we were shipped to Seattle, Washington, where it rained every day.
Rained all day.
And then we went overseas to Hawaii, where we were assigned to a squadron, which mine was the 45th Squadron of the 15th Group, which was part of the 7th Fighter Command. And
May I pin this microphone on you? And I may move it to Mr. Redwine, and then I may leave it off entirely. But it lets me get your voice just a little bit
okay.
better quality. So, before I interrupt you.
I think we were going to Seattle, and thence we went to Honolulu and to Hawaii, and I was stationed at Bellows Field, which is on the windward side of the island. That is the opposite side from where Honolulu is. And we were assigned to the 45th Fighter Squadron, which, as I said, is a part of the 15th Group, which is a part of the 7th Fighter Command. We had P-47 aircraft. We were training, and the people who trained us, who were the several grades and levels above us, had already been in action in the Pacific, in the Makin Islands, or perhaps Guadalcanal, some of those places. So we trained in the P-47s for some months, and then we were given the P-51 aircraft, which was perhaps the outstanding, perhaps the best fighter plane of World War II, perhaps. That's argument, I guess, but we thought it was. And after a month or two training in the P-51, we were shipped to Saipan for a short time, and thence to Iwo Jima, which was in March of 1945 being taken by the United States Marines. And my outfit went on Iwo Jima something like 20 or 30 days after the invasion of Iwo Jima. That is to say, we went on to the island on the #1 airfield, which was the South Airfield, which was under the shadow of Mount Suribachi, which you may have heard of. And we were down there, and the Marines were still fighting the Japs on the northern end of the island. The island's only 15 miles long.
No, 8.
Well, whatever it is, it ain't very long. And so we didn't do much flying at that time, because our mission when we went to Iwo Jima was to escort the B-29s for strikes to what they called the Empire, which was the home land. B-29s were the big bombers, and we were to escort them and protect them from Jap fighters and so forth. And Iwo Jima was taken for that purpose, to base P-51s, along with the purpose of being a haven for the B-29s to land, if they were or what have you, on the way back from a mission to Japan. See, the B-29s were stationed in Saipan, Tinian, which was 1,500 miles from Japan. Iwo Jima is halfway, 750 miles from Japan. And the missions we flew were 750 miles away from Iwo Jima to Japan, which is a hell of a long mission for a single-engine fighter plane at the time, World War II. So, go ahead.
Iwo Jima, was it 2 miles by 4 miles, or was it 8 miles by 2 miles?
I was thinking it was 15 miles long, but it was shaped like a pork chop.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a very big place.
But they ended up with three airfields on the place.
And right, it had 3 airfields. We were on the #1 field, which was the first one the Marines captured that we could go on. And from thence we flew missions to island of Chichijima, which is about 200 or 300 miles up the road, which was, I guess, more training than anything else, because there really wasn't that much resistance at Chichijima. And then we began to fly missions to Japan itself, which I say is a round trip of 1,500 miles, which in that fighter plane was in something from 7 to 8 hours, which is a pretty damn long time in a little plane which is about this wide. The cockpit's about as wide as this chair I'm sitting in.
Do you guys have enough fuel for that?
We had barely enough. We had a wing tank on each wing, and plus all the other the fuel, the regular tanks. And about the time you got to Japan, your wing tanks were used up, and you would drop them and switch to your regular fuel tanks. And you barely had enough to get back to Iwo Jima if you were lucky. I only flew 3 of those long missions. I crashed on the 4th one and burned up myself airplane, and I never did fly anymore.
Where were you when you crash landed?
Iwo Jima. I crashed on takeoff. I blew a tire and crashed on takeoff. This was on June the 19th, 1945, which I still remember that date.
Were you hospitalized afterwards?
A long time, yeah. I was burned over, I think they said 50% of my body, which at that time should have been fatal, but something spared me. Perhaps to come here and talk to you.
I certainly hope so.
Okay.
Can you tell me of the medical care you received?
Oh, well, I might tell you a little incident that I learned at one of our squadron reunions about 3 years ago that I didn't know before. I crashed this plane. It was, of course, had wing tanks full of lead, I guess, and somewhere or another out through the cockpit, which had burned off. And they tell me that I was running across the runway with my clothes on fire. And Dr. A.M. Goldman, who is our flight surgeon, Captain Goldman, he's still living in New Orleans, tackled me on the runway and put the flames out, and thereby saved my life. That's what they told me at one of these reunions. I never knew that before. But anyway, yes, they had a field hospital in Iwo Jima, which they gave me adequate care, very good. And later I was moved to the big general hospital in Guam, where I stayed, I guess, a month or 2 months or something like that.
And then home after that, or did
I went back to Iwo Jima, but I never went back on flying status, and somewhere along in, I guess, August, I was shipped home. They cut orders. I hitchhiked home, by the way. They cut orders in Iwo Jima to get you to Guam, or Saipan, I forget which, and then you sit around and wait until the airplane was going to Hawaii that had a vacant seat, and you, hey, can I get on with you? And they said, yeah, come on. So we got to Hawaii, and then we waited there until we had a plane that was going to go to San Francisco, and we flagged a ride on him.
Now, did you send letters home? Did you get letters over there? Were they censored?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah. The letters were censored. In fact, we, who were commissioned officers, and I don't understand the rationale now, I guess I did then, the officers censored the letters of the enlisted men. We actually had to read the letters and cut out. I don't think I ever cut anything out of one. And some of them I didn't read, really. I just stuck them in there and let them go.
And what family did you have at home at that time?
My mother and father and brothers and sisters, we lived in Hull, Georgia, which is a town 6 miles out from Athens. And of course, the chaplain notified my parents, and I still have those somewhere, the notification that your son has been critically injured, this, that, and the other, and we'll keep you posted, which they did. They sent a postcard every week. And finally they sent one that said, he's out of danger, you're going to live.
Can you tell me a little something of your career since World War II? What have you been doing? Did you marry? That sort of thing.
Oh yeah, I married a hometown girl that we had dated in school. Ruth Drury was her maiden name. We're still married. We have 5 children and 11 grandchildren. I came back from the war and I went to the University of Georgia and got a degree. And I went with Courts and Company, which was a brokerage house in Athens at that time, for a short time. I worked there part-time while I was going to the university. And later I joined the firm of Smith Bowley Brown, where I'm still with, which is a local real estate and insurance firm. All I do nowadays is real estate appraisals. That's all I've done for 20, 30 years.
And where have you been living since World War II? Did you move back to Hull, Georgia upon your return?
I lived with my parents while I went to school at the university, and when Ruth and I got married on December 22nd of 1946, we had an apartment in Athens, and we've lived in Athens where we live now on Cherokee Avenue, which is known as the Five Points area, and we've always lived in 2 or 3 blocks of where we live now.
How did you meet, if I might ask?
I don't specifically remember, but don't tell her that.
We can edit that out. Where did you anything with it?
I don't know. I was a student at Winterville High School, and she was a student at Athens High, and we met and dated some. She had a cousin that lived at Winterville, as I remember, and that's how we met, I think. But
What did you study at the university? On the GI Bill, man?
Went on the GI Bill, sure did. And I got a general business degree called a BB, a Bachelor of Business Administration, which is a very general degree, which wouldn't do you much good nowadays probably because you need to specialize. But I had a general business degree.
Well, let me quickly move this little microphone onto Mr. Redwine, and then I'll come back to you both.
Okay.
Let's see. Mr. Redwine, just clip that to your shirt there. I think if it flipped around and just simply clip that to your collar.
About that.
Fine. Simply adjust this over here. And would you tell me a little something of what you experienced of the World War II era?
Well, I was attending the Virginia Military Institute in Lexington, Virginia, when the war started. And the following 1942, I went up to December the 7th, 42, I enlisted in the Air Force Reserves there in Charlottesville, Virginia. I had been told, I was a year and a half into I was a sophomore at VMI, and I've been told if you joined the Air Force Reserves that you could graduate from college before they called you. And 90 days later, I was down at Richmond in the courthouse. I'd been called up, and I was with the entire William and Mary football team whose coach had heard the same malicious rumor. So I was called up in March of 43 and was sent to Nashville, Tennessee for processing, I guess you'd call it. Then down to Maxwell Field, where you took your pre-flight training. Maxwell Field, Alabama, there in Montgomery. From there I went to Sutherfield in Americus, Georgia for primary, then out to Greenwood, Mississippi for basic training in the BT-13, and then went to Dothan, Alabama. That time you made an election in whether you wanted to fly bombers, multi-engine, or single engine. I picked single engine, and most everybody got that choice and was given that choice, and I went to Dothan and graduated there. And like Jack, I was in 44C, but we got delayed in my group somewhere or another and didn't graduate to get out of there until later, in late 44. I guess it was in August or September of 44. Then I was assigned to Randolph Field to be an instructor in the BT-13s, went to Morley, Missouri, and they closed down Morley, Missouri, and then I went through processing of being a fighter pilot, went to Eglin Field for gunnery training in Marianna, Alabama to fly the P-40s, then went down to Sarasota in the P-51s. And from Sarasota, I was sent, like Jack said, to Seattle, Washington, and then went by boat to Hawaii and Honolulu and stayed there about 3-4 weeks, and then was flown out to Iwo Jima by way of Saipan or Guam. I think we stopped at Guam and then went up to Iwo. And Jack Thornton and I were on the same island flying P-51s, but never knew about the fact that we were there together until many years later, when I got acquainted with him through the real estate and finance business. And from Iwo, of course, we were sent over there to fly escort for the B-29s from the Marianas, Guam, Saipan, and Tinian. And at that time, we were flying cover for the 29s, but the Japs were pretty well quit coming up to encounter the 29s, and we were given strafing missions. And we were sent up there to Osaka, Nagoya, Tokyo, like Tachikawa Air Force Base and various Air Force bases to try to strafe the Japanese planes. And what the Japs did was that they would make some model planes and put them on the runways and hide, secrete their bombers and fighter planes, some 3, 4